Mm. So just settling into a comfortable meditation posture. That typically is upright, but one of the advantages of Zoom is that if it's easier for you to meditate lying down or in some other kind of angle, you can do that. So let yourself be comfortable and just being aware that sort of being, you might say, too comfortable could encourage you to get drowsy. So just to notice that, notice your energy as you're meditating. It's one of the things to kind of track. And you can close your eyes or just lower your gaze, turning the attention inward, coming into stillness. Stillness of the body supports the cultivation of stillness of mind. And even before any stillness of mind, I think it kind of highlights things that are going on in the mind and the body. So just feeling the body at rest. You might notice then the contrast between the stillness of the body and maybe the busyness of the mind, or the kind of energetic feelings, emotional feelings. We see right away that even when we stop moving the body, that there's still a lot of other movement. We can have a sense of spaciousness, just allowing that movement. As I say, whether it's thoughts or just feelings, energies in the body, restlessness. With restlessness, there can be this impulse to move, this sense that we need to move. But when we can restrain that, it can give us a different relationship to that energy. You just feel the breath moving. Start to see that the whole mind and body are like a field of energy. And so just to relax with that. The one image that's quite apt is the image of surfing. We have to imagine ourselves as the very stable one on the surfboard, very balanced. As the energies of the ocean carry us along. We stay balanced and unmoved, undisturbed. And you might then start to pay closer attention to the breath. Let the breath become your meditation object. You can pay close attention to one area of sensation, like the nostrils or the belly. You can also alternatively feel the whole body breathing. And we're trying to take an attitude of ease and calm, although it's quite normal for those qualities to get swept away with some thoughts, find ourselves disturbed, worrying about something, remembering something. And when we notice that happening, we just acknowledge it and come back to the breath. And sometimes when we return to the breath, there's just this sense of arriving, settling, kind of relief when we let go of thoughts. Other times, though, if there's a kind of persistent concern in the mind, we come back to the breath and we can feel that we're still agitated in some way. Or maybe the thinking just triggered some difficult feelings. And usually it's not that we want to turn away from those feelings, but actually turn toward maintaining contact with the breath, to breathe with the feelings. So important not to develop a relationship of conflict with our own mind. If we set up in our minds this idea of good and bad and right and wrong, or what we want to feel or should feel versus what we are feeling, there's just an inherent conflict that is really unresolvable because we're fighting with ourselves. So what's essential here is to, as the 12th step literature says, to cease fighting anyone or anything, to cease fighting with our own mind or our own feelings. All right. Um, I just need to write a quick note here. Sorry. So, I thought I would take up a theme that shows up in Living Kindness, and uh, I talk about this sutta called the Simile of the Saw, which is a wild sutta where the Buddha says you shouldn't have any hatred toward anyone, even if they're sawing off your limbs. Uh, what an order! I can't go through with it, as we say. But um, earlier in the sutta, there's a little scene kind of between this maid named Kali and her boss, called her mistress in the sutta, and Kali suspects that even though her boss kind of puts on this happy, nice face in public, that she has an underlying tendency of anger, and Kali then kind of sets out to test her, and she keeps getting up later and later in the morning until Vedahika loses her temper, and then Kali, sort of goes to the neighbors and says, "See how she's a phony," basically. But this idea of underlying tendencies, I think, is a really helpful one. And I think it might be in that same chapter where I talk about the word irritable. And actually, I thought of it today because I looked in my daily reflections, and today was talking about this word irritable. Able to be irritated is how I translate it. It's called, I was asked what the name of the sutta is. It's called the Simile of the Saw. It's in the Majjhima Nikaya. I think it's number 21. So just put that in the chat. So then, as I've thought about this idea of underlying tendencies, it's sort of a way of analyzing yourself in a way, and sort of seeing what are your tendencies. Where does your mind tend to go, and mine doesn't go as much to anger as it goes to depression. And I was talking about this on Sunday at the Recovery Dharma event, how I had this experience some years ago when I would notice that when I was driving out to Spirit Rock to give my class on the second Friday of each month, that I'd get past Fairfax, it'd be a couple miles from Spirit Rock, and a mood would come over me, a kind of depressive type mood, or sad, just sort of negative energy, down kind of energy. And I started to notice it and ask myself, why would I be feeling that? And sort of finally asked, like, this doesn't seem like a normal mood to get in when you're going to teach. Like, I'm not sad about going to Spirit. I'm happy to go to Spirit Rock, but maybe I'm nervous. And because I have an underlying tendency to turn everything into depression, it's like my psyche or my whatever, however you think of it, like somehow I interpret the feeling, I transmute it into something that it isn't. I turn anxiety into sadness. Um, and maybe some of you psychologists out there have a better way of understanding this. But the point for me, well, first of all, the point was to see, oh, I'm not really depressed. So I don't have to like get into like, why am I depressed? What's going on? I better have to solve this, which is like the story, right? Which is the problem with underlying tendencies, that we kind of grip onto them and then we go with them. And they have the term papancha, proliferating thought. We just go with it. Instead of just like, well, this is a funny feeling to have, and it's sort of irrelevant, and I'm going to be at Spirit Rock in 5 minutes, and so I'm not even going to be able to think about my feelings because I'm going to be dealing with teaching and greeting people, and of course it always would pass immediately, and it would be gone. And so this idea then is to kind of start to see, what are your underlying tendencies? Where does your mind tend to go? Because really, in some ways, the unacknowledged and unseen underlying tendencies can really almost define the direction of our lives. When we're really driven by anxiety or anger, or for a person who sort of thrives on conflict, or thrives on avoiding conflict, and we see that these tendencies, these emotional tendencies, then drive our behavior, and then our behavior kind of creates all the circumstances of our lives, and so it's not just a like interesting inventory sort of thing to do, but it's really something that has great impact on the whole karmic flow of our lives. I mean, for sure, for me, that underlying tendency was in some ways crippling uh, uh, in my life. I started to feel depressed, or to think I was depressed, according to this idea, when I was 14. And by the time I was 16, I dropped out of school, and I was a good student, like I could have certainly gone to college. I was raised in a very privileged environment. My parents would have taken care of that, you know, uh, and I threw it all away because I couldn't emotionally handle being in school. And I thought the only thing that makes me happy is when I play the guitar. So I have to be a musician. So it was, in one way, it was like, oh, I'm making a choice to like really follow my bliss. But in another way, it was this really fearful uh, um, and very limited. I felt very limited in my choices. It wasn't that I really felt like, oh, I have these choices and I'm going to pick this one. It was, I can't do anything but this because everything else makes me depressed, and that's not to downplay depression. I mean, that's a condition. And so it's I'm at 72 years old now. I don't have, I don't have like, haven't solved that. And to suggest that, oh, I just should have not been bothered by those feelings, isn't realistic either. But I do wonder, I suppose, had I had the tools that I have today, and maybe that's not even a realistic thing because I didn't have the emotional maturity to implement those tools, but just imagining that, like, I'd been introduced to mindfulness and kind of a therapy that would have sort of encouraged me to be with the feelings and to not be afraid of them, and that didn't have a condition, because I was very much like diagnosed, also, and diagnoses are you know, they're they're in my mind somewhat problematic. On the one hand, yeah, it's important if you have a really painful emotional states to have some context for them and to have some care for them. And sometimes medication is needed and all sorts of care. But on the other hand, there's a way in which when you tell a 14-year-old kid, or when a 14-year-old kid gets the idea in his mind that he is depressed, and that when he sees that the adults around him, namely my family, also identify as depressed, that he takes it on. And instead of having a different relationship to it, it becomes identity, and it became my identity. And I don't mean to be, turning this into, my own therapy and my own, personal exploration here with you guys, but really to try to, because I think, I hope, and I talk about something like this because I think that it's something that many people probably can relate to in some way, that each of you has some story, particularly because you're all in recovery. So you all had some crises in your lives and some behaviors that were totally counterproductive and destructive, that were driven presumably by underlying tendencies, right? Unacknowledged feelings that you couldn't manage, the powerless, unmanageable, right? That there were things that you didn't know how to solve. And so you made unwise choices, right? Like, oh, I can't handle this, I'm going to have a drink. I can't handle this, I need to eat a box of cookies. I can't handle this, I need to go have sex with strangers. All the things that we do that are responses to these unseen, unacknowledged underlying tendencies. So this is obviously where mindfulness comes in, right? So important. And it's not, this is, not, we really have to avoid the simplistic idea of mindfulness. Oh, I just need to feel my feelings. Well, okay, there's more to it than that, because, there's a reason why we were avoiding feeling those feelings, because they were uncomfortable. And we didn't sense that there was another way to relate to them. So mindfulness is the being with and being present, and not turning away from the feelings, but right view, the understanding is critical in that as well. So the right view is seeing this is just a feeling. This is temporary. I am giving it a name, but that's it. In the same way that we say not self, feelings also don't have a self. That is, they don't have an identity. We give them a name, but it's not what they are. And we have to watch out that when we name something, we solidify it, in the same way that when I say, I'm Kevin, and this is who I am, I solidify something. So in the same way, when I say, I'm depressed, or I'm anxious, or I'm angry, I'm solidifying that and I'm reifying it. So all of this right view needs to accompany the mindfulness. Because if you're just mindful, then you're just sitting there going, oh, wow, this is horrible. What am I going to, let me breathe. let me do some loving kindness. Oh, get through. We get into this relationship where we think that our mindfulness is supposed to fix it and make it go away. And we have to understand that mindfulness isn't necessary. Mindfulness and meditation and loving kindness can help to kind of bring some soothing and to give a container and to hold it a little bit more easily. But we also need to have this picture, this right view and understanding of what's going on, so that if we have a sustained period of difficult emotions, we don't have to act on the aversion to it. We don't have to act out the craving that comes up. We can realize, oh, I can be with pain. I can be with discomfort. I mean, I feel like that was going back to my, adolescence. That was one of the critical things. I just couldn't understand that it was okay to have some pain, that it's okay to be uncomfortable, and that you can still move forward, that you can still go to work, go to school, show up for people, take care of yourself, even though you're feeling some emotional discomfort. So interesting. I'll just say as I'm talking here how these things, I think it's pretty obvious that these ideas are very personal to me, and that it really does. Um, there's a lot of energy in this stuff, and I guess my hope is that my engagement and the intensity that I feel is conveyed in a helpful way to people. Because it surprises me sometimes. I mean, I was like, oh, what am I going to talk about this morning? Sort of thing, and then I find myself in the middle of this, like, just like gripped, like I feel it sort of feels very dramatic to me, Um, yeah, I mean, this work, it is so important to me. I I was saying, oh, imagining like being old and like just being mellow, and yeah, that ain't the story. I find life continues to be very engaging and interesting. I yeah, I'm gonna hold off on going off on another riff there, and I think I'll just open it up now and see if there are any thoughts or comments and questions people have. I see someone has posted the simile of the saw. That's wonderful. Good job. Thank you, Jonathan. Um, I will say, yeah, as I mentioned, that I do have a chapter in Living Kindness that's on that topic. Yeah. Hi, Vanessa. I'm not hearing you, even though you're not muted. So I'm not sure why that is. I have to see, your microphone is somehow not working. Still not working. Okay, well, check it out. Try going into your preferences in Zoom and under audio, see if what microphone is happening. In the meantime, Flippy, hello.
All right, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Great. Hey, Kevin. Thank you for the talk today. I really appreciate it. I have my own mental stuff I go through. I talked about it a little bit earlier, a few months ago. What I thought was emptiness, or what I thought was maybe a spiritual experience, is more like a freeze response. And I've done a lot of studying on it, and been to some Dharma talks, and they're talking about like independent, IFS, internal family systems. And that's what it's talking about is welcoming these feelings and these thoughts as they come in, and I'm going to start taking some therapy in that. So I think that'll help me, and that's the theme that has been that for me the past week or so is to be with what's going on, and I've been approaching it with allowance and curiosity, and it really helps to appease it. But it's something I've been working on for the past 3 years, and if you could go a little bit more into you were talking about I'm not really good with words, but right view or right.
Yeah.
Is that what I'm talking about as far as the right view of recognizing it for what it is and allowing it to be as it is and having curiosity? Is that similar to that, or?
Certainly it's an aspect of it. So
Okay.
view is a component of the Eightfold Path, and it has a specific meaning in sort of traditional Buddhism, but I'm really broadening the meaning in a way to be like kind of similar to what you're saying, sort of being curious and not being caught in your sort of reactive relationship to feelings. I like this idea of our relationship to our feelings. This is, I think, a really important piece of this, and goes to that, and is what you're talking about to a great extent, that like to realize that our typical relationship to our feelings is these are real and I need to act on them, right? And right view is they aren't real and you don't need to act on them necessarily, that you can, and of course they're real in the sense that there's an experience happening, but as I said, like reifying them, turning into this solid things. So right view is more like, as you're saying, like, what is this? And what's a wise way of responding to this? Can I hold this? Is there some wisdom in this? It's more like curiosity, asking questions rather than just acting on, and reacting to the feelings that arise.
Thank you. That explains a lot. And that's what I've been doing, is asking questions to it too. Like even asking who does this belong to is a good thing, or
that's a great
open-ended
one.
questions help. So looks like I'm on the right track, and I do appreciate the talk. You really widened what I've been doing and reaffirmed what I've been practicing. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. It's nice to see you. Holly. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for that. I totally relate to that, because everything I go right to depression from any little stressor. That's great to connect the dots. Oh my God. I gotta really look at that. But that's a great. Thank you. I wanted to, a few weeks back, you said something about some people can look at teach breathing like as if you were filling up instead of filling up from the bottom.
Right.
And that really helped me because I have asthma. And I have this experience of gasping for air. And it really helps to think of just filling my lungs right where they are, instead of trying to, look at my nose and think, oh, I'm not getting enough air.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say I really got a lot out of that. So thank you.
That's really interesting. Thank you for letting me know that, because I'm always interested in addressing the different kinds of challenges people have. So if I know that I can say, well, if you have asthma, this can help this might be a helpful approach to working with your breath. That's a really nice addition to my toolbox.
The way you said it about creating a vacuum and the air just goes in.
Yeah.
That was a good image for me. So thank you.
Thank you. And then Eleanor was kind enough, Eleanor, who is a speech therapist, I believe, is that right? What you were, Eleanor? Yeah. So she understands the anatomical processes that are happening with breath. And she sent me a nice email about it that maybe she'll share with the group sometime. That was quite detailed. Yeah. So Vanessa, you got your microphone working?
I don't know.
There you go. I can hear you. Everybody's applauding you.
Sorry about that. So I moved a couple of weeks ago, and one of the reasons I moved partly was to try and get away from some noise. And I've moved into a flat, and there's lots of noise here. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
And I believe I have a condition called misophonia, and I think from what you said, it's the same thing. I'm putting a label on it as an illness of my brain being more sensitive to noise.
Right.
And it's particularly noisy when I try and meditate in the morning here. And it's, I just don't know what to do with it, really. If you could advise.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, that sounds really unpleasant and difficult. And I don't want to sort of just, I will make some suggestions, but with the acknowledgement that because I haven't had to deal with that, I might not be able to get to the, this might not necessarily be, well, let's just say I'm not offering a fix, but I think it's really interesting to our relationship to noise with meditation is an interesting one, because there is a tendency to think, oh, I need it to be quiet when I'm meditating. But when I learned mindfulness meditation early on, it was explained to me that if there's a noise, I can just listen to that rather than trying to block it out. So it's different from other kinds of meditation, like where if you're just trying to get really concentrated, that then a noise can be harder to deal with. But with mindfulness, the suggestion is if there's a noise, just turn your attention to that and kind of breathe with that. And then when the noise passes, you can come back. So a couple other things about that. Ajahn Sumedho, who's a famous Buddhist monk, I'll put his name in there. Ajahn Sumedho, early in his, career, if you can call a monk having a career, discovered that his mind was drawn to just the buzzing sound in his ears. And so instead of paying attention to the breath, he started to pay attention to that. And he now calls it the sound of silence. So he listens, he uses sound as his meditation. And Ajahn Amaro, who's one of his students, one of his really senior students, adopted that as well and teaches it, not as you should do this, but you can try this. So I work with that to a certain degree at times. And as a musician, I've always found it helpful for me to use sound as a meditation. There's also a famous story from Ajahn Chah, who was Ajahn Sumedho's teacher. And Ajahn Chah is a famous Thai Buddhist, forest Buddhist monk. And he was apparently the first time he came to London. I don't think he was probably not there more than a couple of times, but first time he came to London, they had rented a space, and it was across the street from a pub that had a punk rock band playing. And it was very hot. It was August. It was probably in the mid 70s, late 70s, maybe. And people kept closing the windows because of the noise, and then other people would open the windows because of the heat. All during the meditation, right? You're meditating, but people are, and so at the end of the meditation, Ajahn Chah was like, so were you bothered by the noise? People were like, yeah, that was really annoying. And he said, no, you have it wrong. You are annoying the sound. The sound is not annoying you. And I mean, it was like really, I can imagine everybody going, oh God, we blew it, the shame, the monk called us out. But it's just like, it's a really interesting thing. Like the sound isn't, doesn't have any intention. It's just sound. It's just, the sound waves moving through space, moving through the air, and then encountering our eardrums. And then our eardrums, when it hits our eardrums, there's something called Vedana, which is the pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral feeling that every sense experience arouses in us. So when there's a sound that we don't like, or if we generally just don't want sound, it's unpleasant Vedana. And then the unpleasant Vedana triggers aversion. So it's to see that there's separate things happening. There is sound, which has no, valence to it. It's not actually pleasant or unpleasant. It's just sound. But our conditioning triggers either a pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral feeling from that sound. And then if it's a pleasant feeling, then we want more. If it's an unpleasant feeling, we want less. If it's a neutral feeling, we probably won't notice it. And so it's really helpful. One of the kind of classical mindfulness meditation practices is to try to notice that this is just unpleasant. I don't have to get into a relationship of conflict with it. The relationship of conflict is the aversion, right? If I can just go, unpleasant, I don't like it, breathe. Unpleasant, breathe, then I kind of avoid falling into this relationship of conflict. And so that's the sort of the classical mindfulness suggestion. I don't know that you can do that necessarily. I mean, I think that's quite an order. It's quite a challenge to try to stay at that relationship, but at least to remember that this is what's actually happening. And it doesn't have to be so much of a problem. It's, again, as we've been kind of changing your relationship to the experience and not taking it personally, not being afraid of it, just kind of going, this is unpleasant. Let me just see if I can breathe with it. That's kind of the best I can offer.
Oh, that's very helpful. Thank you. I will try some of that.
All right, good. Thanks, Vanessa. So one more, Kate.
Yes, hello, good morning from Wisconsin. It's very interesting that the previous person was talking about misophonia. I too have realized at a very late age, that is indeed this sort of rageful feeling is responsible for. And as a young child, I couldn't stand the sound of the fork hitting my mother's teeth when she ate. I could not tolerate the sound of cracking gum, somebody tapping a pencil, picking on finger, anything that created a clicking sound. Just seemed to launch this unbearable rage that I had to contain, because certainly I must be out of my mind to be this annoyed with such a benign thing. And yet to find out, 60 some years later that, oh, there's a word for this. And I too don't necessarily like to attach to the labels definition or the labels. I was grateful for some clarity, at least, about what this actually is and can be. And to actually read a description where they say one of the symptoms is a sort of a deep-seated rage to want to strike out. It was just like, I could not even begin to believe how spot on it was for me. And I have worked with it through my recovery. I've worked with it in meditation. And today I can be around some of those noises I could not bear as a young child. I just absolutely thought I was captive and I was being punished for something I did. How could I feel this horrible about people? Why can't they stop? That, the whole thing goes. And it's just sort of a never-ending spiral. And so, I wish ease on the previous person to find some space for that, and it can be done. I just
so
wanted
interesting.
to share that.
It's really, really interesting. Thank you for sharing it. And yeah, I mean, that's seems like a classic underlying tendency as the theme of the talk today. And yeah, it's not just enough to go, oh, well, there's this thing, I'll just let it go. It's obviously much deeper than that. But as you say, there is some benefit in having it sort of identified. As you say, it's like, okay, I'm not just crazy. And it's like, I'm not alone with this is part of that, I think. And then realizing, but then I don't have to be a victim of it either. I can kind of change my relationship to it and work with it and learn to work with it, befriend it somewhat. And yeah, that's beautiful. Can you spell this word?
Yeah, it's believe it or not, miso, M-I-S-O.
Oh, okay.
Phonia.
Phonia.
P-H-O-N-I-A.
Okay. Misophonia. Okay.
Misophonia.
Okay.
And
so it has nothing to do with
I'm
soy.
actually starting to think it might be M-Y.
Yeah.
So.
Right. That might be because it sounds like it's a Greek word, right?
Yeah,
with the PH.
So it would be Y.
It's MI because it's like misogyny. It seems to be
miso. Okay, right. Miso,
yeah.
right. Not liking, right? Right, or misanthropy, like a misanthrope. All right. Wow. We got to some good stuff today. Thank you all for participating. And with the, it seems like this is a nice reflection for each of us, is just over these coming days to kind of notice our underlying tendencies, breathe with them, see what we can learn from them. I wanted to mention that this Friday I will be on the Spirit Rock Zoom account, which is, there's a link to it on the front page of my website as well as on this Spirit Rock website. And Vanessa is reminding us that she has created a public Facebook group, Kevin Griffin Dharma and Recovery Discussion. If you want to look for the group and join. Very nice. Thank you, Vanessa. All right, everybody. Be well. Stay safe and watch out for those underlying tendencies. Take care.